Well, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining this session on solidifying your GRC processes and really focus primarily in the healthcare environment and why it's so attractive to cybersecurity criminals. My name is Tom Leahy. I'm the SVP of Sales and Business Development with SureShield. And we've done a lot of work, and we do a lot of work in the healthcare environment. I personally have worked in compliance, security, and risk management for about 30 years in the healthcare environment. So we welcome you all to this session. A lot of relevant information and things that are happening in the world right now that make this even a more timely subject and area of need. As far as the agenda is concerned, we're going to talk a little bit about healthcare's urgent need for cyber resiliency. We're going to discuss some of what we would call the guiding principles for cybersecurity, security, compliance, and integrity, the cost of poor performance, and the SureShield playbook for success around this. And then we're going to talk specifically around an area with a spotlight on things and the activities that are happening in Ukraine and Russia, and why that would have an impact potentially on you as a provider. Surprisingly enough, it probably has some significant potential impact, and we'll talk about that as it relates to the integrity-related issues. And then lastly, we will go ahead and end the session. We'll give you a little product overview of some solutions that can help you with this. We'll have a brief Q&A, and then for those of you who are interested, we're also offering trialing of some of the solutions that we provide. Please note, for those of you who are participating, you will receive a copy of this content as well as the content of the webinar presentation as well. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Obviously, a lot of things that are happening today, a lot of with the issues in Ukraine, issues in China and the likes, the shields up, the need to be more cyber resilient is being warned to us by our own federal government, by the CISA group, the Center for Infrastructure and Security offices, and just telling us that we are going to need to be prepared because we're going to get hit. And disproportionately so, healthcare is significantly targeted. You make up only 14% of the total workforce, but we see a larger percentage of attacks taking place on healthcare as opposed to other sectors. And that's not to say that all these other sectors that include critical infrastructure, service industries are not getting hit. They are, but healthcare has been disproportionately hit. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Why is it so targeted? Well, first of all, as you may know, the black market value of a healthcare record prior to any kind of cyber attacks and all taking place is significant. The average healthcare record comes at a black market value almost $250 per record, whereas stealing credit cards has a much smaller value. And why is that? Well, there's a lot of data, obviously, in a healthcare record that can go from insurance information, that can go to identification information. And the utility of that can be used for a variety of different criminal activities, stealing identities, actually going in and having healthcare services delivered under the auspices of another provider. Again, why it's so targeted. And realistically and unfortunately, because of a lot of things that have been taking place, obviously the pandemic put a big constraint on resources. A lot of those resources need to be diverted to focusing on patient care and not necessarily protecting critical security infrastructure. And thus, bad players took advantage of that as a means to begin to find ways to breach data, to steal information, to cause ransomware attacks and the likes in the healthcare environment. And of course, there's a lot of competing priorities. Certainly with COVID, you had to redirect a lot of these. We're beginning to see some of that come back in terms of some more critical infrastructure focus, but it was kind of a perfect storm and continues to be a perfect storm for bad players to try to come after those of us that operate in the healthcare industry, and why it's even more important that we focus on having good strategies in place to deal with this. As you know, almost not a day goes by without, first of all, a cyber attack, but even more significantly, the increases that we've seen from March of last year to today have almost continued to double in size. So a very targeted industry, and obviously, as that is the case, the need to have more good tools in place to combat those. So what are some of those guiding principles for providing good security practices? Obviously, one, you need to have good security tools in place. Solutions and processes that can protect the data, can make sure that your house, think of it, is protected, that you're evaluating all the different windows, doors, locks, and all to make sure that people cannot penetrate and get into your environment. And should they, having other tools to help protect the data that's in there. There's, of course, is a component of this, compliance requirements, things like HIPAA, ISO. A lot of the different accrediting bodies that you're dealing with require you to have certain solutions in place, and in order even to get paid it, sometimes you need to demonstrate compliance. And then you have government oversight requirements around making sure that you are taking appropriate actions and steps and have good processes in place to make sure that bad players are not operating within your environment. On the healthcare side, obviously that includes making sure that you're not working with any sanctioned or excluded vendors, employees. We all know the significant fines that can come along with that, and also the difficulty in tracking that and being able to manage that on a regular basis. There's also new initiatives that have been put in place on a more global scale through the government around making sure that any entity that works with anything even close to a federal contract is not working with banned telecommunication providers. Those banned providers today are on lists from particularly Chinese national companies, but you can be assured that they are going to be added to with companies and organizations out of Iran, North Korea, Russia, and the likes. And we will get to the issues around exclusions and sanctions as it relates to Russia itself, and things that you need to be thinking of as a healthcare provider to make sure that you're not working with any of those sanctioned players. So really, having tools as well that can help automate a lot of this process is critical, given the staff shortages and the productivity issues that continue to be a significant constraint on healthcare. And those really focus around kind of three different areas, as we said: security, ensuring that the data security and vulnerability remediations are in place, that you have tools that can provide a continued state of readiness around that, and that you also have a focus on making sure you're not working with bad players. And needless to say, the costs of poor performance are in the news almost every day. You have issues with ransomware attacks that not only damage a hospital's reputation, but put patient safety at significant risk. There's not a day that goes by that you don't see different healthcare entities that have been hacked. Not only are they causing reputation issues for your organization, they also come with significant penalties and fines. And there are new solutions that are coming out there where they're not even getting concerned about ransomware, They're just looking to create bad problems. And there's now tools called killware that will just come out and kill and destroy all the data that you have in your environment without the opportunity to ever get it back. And given, again, things that are taking place in our world, we are expecting that those types of attacks are just and only going to continue to increase. So how does SureShield help with this process? We're focused on providing software and technology tools that can help you more easily manage these processes. So tools to help you do regular ongoing vulnerability management and remediation, tools to help prevent data loss should someone even be able to penetrate your environment, and tools that can help monitor what we would call the bad areas to let you know if there's any bad activities that are going on. We provide compliance management solutions, tools that will help you monitor and conduct all your compliance assessments. And then we have other solutions around the integrity areas, helping you maintain and make sure that you're not working with providers, vendors, contractors that are on these federal databases. And the cost of that can be very significant to an organization, including having to pay back claims on any provider that had operated in such a fashion. So I'm going to get into talking a little bit around a specific area, which is the integrity side. We will do a brief product overview, and we'll show you a little bit around all these solutions. But let's touch a little bit about the integrity and also issues, as we said, the spotlight on Russia. So as many of you know, the OIG recommendations and insight on oversight, they require that all new employees, providers, and contractors are screened against the known federal databases, the LEIE, the SAM, the OFAC, the CMS databases. And that ideally you should be rescreening all of these people at a minimum monthly. This, as we know, is very seldom happening. And a lot of that has to do with the resource requirements and tools available to do this. And should you have any issues, you need to have solid proof of screening activities, how often you're doing them, what are the dates you're doing them, what are the databases that are being tracked. And lack of proof, particularly in the event that you are working with a sanctioned provider, only puts a spotlight on you for further fines and issues with the OIG. And of course, they want you to be able to act quickly on employees, providers, contractors, if they are identified, and be able to demonstrate that you have done so. Today, on these lists, there's over 100,000 sanctioned providers and businesses on these lists. So being able to easily monitor those against your own provider database can be difficult. And where does this spotlight on Russia come in? Well, as many of you may or may not be aware, there is a database called the Office of Foreign Assets Sanctions List, the OFAC. Needless to say, over 500 companies and individuals from Russia were recently put on these lists with the heightened tensions that have come up and the sanctions that we're enforcing. As you know now, the OFAC list goes way beyond these just these Russian companies, but you can be certain that there's going to be a lot of attention and focus on making sure that you don't have any of these individuals or companies in here. And because very few healthcare organizations actually check that list, you're at an even further risk of possibly having somebody working within that environment or an entity you may not even think or be aware of that may be operating in your healthcare environment. And if that is the case, given the intense scrutiny that our government is putting on this right now, you can be certain that they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that nobody is doing any work with any of these sanction groups. So with these current tensions and focus, you obviously should be doing the same in your organization. And again, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. Well, with us, obviously, as you know, there's huge challenges. A lot of this process is typically done manually. So you may be having people that are going and checking these databases. As we just said, it's rare recently that anyone's been checking OFAC. There's really not any easy automated processes that many of you are aware of that can help do this. And sometimes you're relying on external resources to do that and doing it in a spot fashion. So the issues with that, of course, are that one day you could have checked and found out everything's fine. And unbeknownst to you, the next day, a provider, a vendor, or someone like that shows up on this list. Until you check that again, or unless you have other sources of information to let you know that that's taken place, you could be operating with someone for days, weeks, months. And should that be identified, these cost impacts are very, very significant. They can be up to as much as $16,000 a claim per day. So how do we help with this process? We've leveraged and created technology that really almost acts like a regular monitor for you on a daily basis. We go out and we monitor all the federal and state exclusion and ban vendor databases, including the OFAC. We have a system that will go in and look at those databases. We'll look for any changes in those databases. And then we immediately match them to your ecosystem environment. So at any given point in time, on any given day, if anything has changed, you would automatically be alerted to that fact so that you can take rapid and quick action. And then, of course, also have all the audit reports, all the backup information to demonstrate the activities, the processes that you took to either remove that individual or that company from your environment, or to support with proper documentation why there potentially could have been a false match and why that, and how you've gone about addressing that. This is just kind of a pictorial of the differences between what might be considered a current process and the SureShield process. And the current process on the left, really in many things, as we found out, isn't even true in healthcare for the most part now. There's not many entities that are or are capable of checking against their providers on a monthly basis. It's just simply too manual or too costly for them. So in this example, if you were even ideally checking on a monthly basis, on day one, let's say we checked a provider and that provider came back fine. They were not sanctioned, they didn't end up on the list. 3 days later, they end up on that list. Well, if they're providing services and you're not checking for another 28 days, you have 28 days of penalty enforced at a $16,000 clip per claim, as much as it could be. It could be up to over $500,000 in penalty, and that doesn't include how long that may have gone on. So if you're not doing this regularly or you're not doing this monthly, just add the additional days and you can see what the potential penalties are for that. Now contrast that with the SureShield process. Because we are checking and monitoring these databases on a nightly basis, you would start with that provider on day one and see that they were not sanctioned. However, when day 3 came about, as soon as they hit that list, we would be notifying you and we would be notifying your constituents that this individual or this vendor or this entity showed up, and therefore allow you to take the appropriate action to either remove them, to pull privileges, to complete a compliance audit on them, and make sure that you are not subject to any of these kinds of penalties. And that's the software doing that work for you. So think of it as an exception-based tool. It will let you know if things have changed in your ecosystem that require you to take action on it. And this is done, these processes are done, not only they're done when you're looking at evaluating bringing a provider in, and then ongoing once that provider, that entity is in your environment. A brief pictorial in terms of kind of how the technology works, where we go in and we hit all of these databases. We match that against the source data that we have from the provider, and then we tell you if there's any changes or issues with what is there. And we do that across all the federal and all the state databases. And note, OFAC in our case is just another database that we're checking. So by working with us, you're already knowing that you're having all of these things checked, and you're not having to go out and check them on your own. So I'm going to pause here and just give a very brief kind of overview of the product offerings that we have here at SureShield. We are also going to conclude after some of the questions that we get with the opportunity for you or anyone in your environment to even trial and test out these tools briefly. So I am going into our solutions database, and think of this as a provider that's activated a number of our products. So keep in mind, we have, as we said, a compliance solution that's under the auspices of SureShield. We have a security solution, and then we have what we call that integrity management solution. So as I'm looking at this dashboard, it's showing me the different types of, let's say, compliance frameworks that I'm monitoring and measuring my organization against. If I were to click into one of these controls, you would come in and be able to see the different regulations or standards that you're having compliance audits done on or assessments done. If I were to click this down to the HIPAA related, I can filter that information. I can break that down into the different domains that apply to that particular area. And then I can, if I'm going in and answering questions, it's as simple as going in and clicking on these hyperlinks and answering the questions or looking at those questions. More importantly, having ways in which I can add comments to support my answers to those questions, or provide evidence that provides evidence to support my answer to that particular question. In any kind of a review or audit, beyond answering, they are going to want to see proof of how you came to that particular answer. And all of that is managed and collected in our compliance-related frameworks. Of course, you can distribute work, so you can send that information out to different individuals. And because it's continuous, at any given point in time, you can see where you stand as it relates to your compliance. So I can run reports, for instance, on what are my reports on compliance. I can filter them based upon the different frameworks, for instance, that we want to be looking at. In this case, I'm going to just run it on this customer. And then you can go ahead and run that information and get the information you need out for that particular customer or that environment. And sorry, I may just be missing a control here. Let me go back and click on my compliance report. This is where I failed. I need to add a regulation or standard, and it apparently is not available in here. So let's go back and show you a couple of other things as it relates to our security related items. Again, in a similar fashion in this dashboard, we run a tool that will go out and identify any types of vulnerabilities you may have in your system. Think of it as an ethical hacker that will come in and access that information, act like it is a hacker without taking negative activities as a hacker. And it will tell you specifically where you have issues and the different types of services that you have running in your environment. whether that, you can look at the host assets, for instance. In this case, we have a 273 host assets running with over 3,000 pieces of software and services. And we've identified the different types of vulnerabilities that are in this environment. We also provide the means to identify the remediations that need to take place in that environment. And again, when these kind of issues are run, you have the ability to go and run various different types of reports on this information. So for instance, if I wanted to look at a top remediation report, based upon the most current scan that I've run or past scans, what would be if I were to apply the top 20 remediations, what impact would that have on my overall risk? And in this case, you get a very quick report. Just a note, these reports can be scheduled to be sent out to different individuals in your environment. You can put these reports into PowerPoint. You can download it into Word and the likes. And in this case, you can see, based upon this particular report, it's showing me that if I were to apply the top 20 remediations, they're actually going to get applied to 161 hosts. They're going to remediate close to 93% of my vulnerabilities, and it's going to improve my risk profile by almost 90%. And there's nice graphicals that can show you what the time frame is in terms of, as you apply those, what the cumulative effect is on that as well. We also go in and provide you information on how those risk scores are calculated, as well as what are the remediations that need to be done to correct those issues, and approximate timelines as to how long that will take. These are also based upon what I would call attacking them one by one. So if you have remediation tools already in your environment, that will significantly cut and reduce the amount of time it may take to apply these types of processes as well. Lastly, just briefly, we have the sanctions and exclusions program. So again, you can break this down by the different types of providers, entities, and the likes you have in your environment. But similarly, in this environment, I would see that I have 193 records. And then within those, I can obviously pare these down and filter these down based upon different things that I see. What type of entity it is. Is it a BA? Is it an individual? Is it a contracted worker? You can break things out based upon departments that you might be working within and let them monitor their own responsibilities, but having a high level compliance insight into that. And also, if you were to go look and find things like sanctioned providers, it will go in and tell you what were the databases that were hit. It'll additionally also tell you, and this is very helpful, particularly if you're contracting with a new provider, we have past data history. So not only do we have information on current, but we also have past sanction information. So while you may be considering bringing someone on that's not currently sanctioned, you might like to know if they were perhaps sanctioned in the past. So in this case, it's showing me in this match, what were the databases that it matched on? I can go in, if I have that data, I can go in and look and see specifically what was the reason for that particular sanction in this particular environment. Not every one of those pulls those, but you can see in this case, this is a SAM and what was the code that was applied to that particular group. You have the ability when you have an alert to even initiate a request for verification or initiate a request for data to let, if you want to get some more supporting documentation as to perhaps why, allow that entity to kind of give them their information as to why this may not be appropriate, or obviously to identify, get more information to help validate and support the audits that you're doing on that in the event that you are looked at for this as well. And of course, if this individual was on the OFAC list, then that would be another database that would show up here as well. And really important to run that through your ecosystem now, to run something like that against a tool like ours to see if you are working with any of those banned providers. And I think a lot of healthcare institutions and others are becoming a little bit shocked with the fact that in some cases they are, because they could be operating under the name of an individual or a company that's been banned that could be a subsidiary of another company, for instance. As we mentioned, you also have the ability, all of this comes with the full-on audit trail to audit all the activities that have taken place on that client environment as well. And similarly, you have the ability to go in and run any kind of reports that you want to run on that particular entity as well. And those can be compliance reports, they can be sanctions and exclusion reports, a number of other things that you can run on them and have as backup documentation for your environment. So with that, we've probably bought you back a little bit of time. This is kind of a brief overview of how our solutions help meet those, what I would call continuous oversight and the SCI requirement components and how we help you with that. In summary, as we know, healthcare is going to continue to be a primary target of cyber criminals. The COVID challenges that are out there continue to strap resources. And so looking for solutions that can help reduce your oversight burden is critical. And now, of course, because there are new foreign threats that are even going to require more vigilance, it's important to have tools in place that will help you with this. And SureShield can help you with that process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to go to the Q&A section to answer any questions you may have. We're going to just run a quick, brief poll to see if folks would like to, should you like to trial out the Integrity Shield tool, or for that matter, any of our other solutions. We make them available for you for trial purposes because we did highlight and focus on integrity. We want to make that offer to the audience here today, and a lot of you came to the session because of that. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this poll open for a couple of minutes while we go ahead and address the the Q&A. And I see first question is, how is the Integrity Shield solution priced? We do not charge based upon the number of checks that are done, which a lot of companies do. We basically kind of look at the size of your ecosystem, and then we provide a very cost-effective monthly subscription fee for giving you this automated, what I would say 24/7 automation monitoring and checking tool. So it's a monthly subscription for the services based upon the size of your ecosystem and those entities that you are asking us to check. In some cases, an organization may perhaps be using something else for a specific area, and they don't include that, so it's only based upon what we are checking for you. One of the questions is, do we provide frameworks to do HIPAA assessments and audits? And yes, I kind of may have gone into this a little bit too quickly for you all, but when I was showing you that compliance suite, we have a HIPAA assessment tool, and that can be used to conduct your HIPAA assessments. And it even marries to our security tool. So if there are identified vulnerabilities, technology vulnerabilities that apply to, let's call it a HIPAA control, we can auto default some non-compliant answers to those. Of course, you have the ability to go in and monitor and review those as well and make changes to that system. Okay, one other question around security. How is that actually deployed? So we've made this very simple and easy to do. Basically, there's a small utility that gets downloaded and has to run off of one Windows machine in your environment. And then it will go out and do what we call a data discovery first. It will discover all the assets in that environment. And then it will allow you to control and set the frequency of scans you may want to do, the subsets of those. You may want to run them on different environments within there. So maybe you have a subnet you want to run at a particular time. You control all of that process, and then the system will then run those scans based upon what you want them to be run on, how often, how frequently, and then, as we said again, most importantly, it not only tells you where issues are, but it will tell you how to correct those issues. And as you correct, you can see the delta in the impact on improving your risk profile. And I don't see any other questions coming up. So hopefully we've bought you back a little time. Again, you know, in this even more dangerous environment, and given a lot of the constraints on healthcare today, it's extremely important that attention is redirected again to this, to providing a good cyber posture and good cyber hygiene within your environment. And more importantly, you know, making sure that you're not working with individuals that you should not be working with. And you can do that by leveraging tools like ours to help streamline and automate that process. So I want to thank everyone again for their time in attending, and wish you the best, and we wish you the best cyber posture and cyber security. Thank you again for attending today's session. We will go ahead and now conclude the session. All the best. Thank you.